Hey there, F1 fans! Welcome back to the channel. As you may already know, F1 Manager 24 has been officially announced with a trailer focused mainly on the big new feature of the Create a Team Career Mode. The game will be out this summer, and I think all fans are happy to have another release for this game, since this was not something granted considering that last year it wasn't exactly a commercial success in terms of sales, leading Frontier to lower the price of this third release. The poor commercial performance was mainly due to the fact that F1 Manager 23 was just an improved copy of the previous release, without any big gameplay change or addition besides race replay and the team switch, which they actually added with a patch after the release of the game. But for me, the game has a huge potential that has not yet properly exploited. I already talked about the new announced features and others that we can expect in this year's version based on the trailer and the press release, so check that video if you haven't already. But now it's time to talk about what I want in the game that would make F1 Manager 24 the ultimate experience in terms of F1 management for me. So buckle up, hit that like button, and let's get started. Starting off easy, the first thing I want is a very simple instruction. Box opposite to the car in front of you. I've lost count on how many times one of my drivers has pitted at the same time as the car in front, cancelling the possibility of overtaking with the strategy, at the point that if you want to perform an undercut, you have to pit several laps before the ideal one to be sure it will function. Adding this instruction should be very easy, and it can make a huge difference in some races. At number 2, we have a big one, something everyone is asking for, similarly to the Create a Team mode. I'm obviously talking about multiplayer. I know, if F1 Manager 24 had multiplayer, they would have already announced it. It would have contributed to the hype for the game even more. So we can safely assume that it won't be present in this year's release. But I am confident that it will be implemented by 2025. Which at the moment is likely to be the last year in which we will have this game if things don't improve in terms of sales, since Frontier may not be interested in renewing the official FIA and Formula 1 licenses. I think multiplayer has the potential to save the game, allowing players to compete against each other for a more challenging experience, and the possibility to play with friends online can add more fun and enjoyment. Number 3 is playable lower categories. This is another thing many are asking for. Starting with an F2 or F3 team and climbing up the rankings until becoming the new F1 Constructor Champion is a dream for many fans. Even though F1 is not like a football league where teams are promoted and relegated, and the idea of an F2 team being promoted into F1 is not very realistic, management games are about imagining, creating, and playing our own dreams and stories. And this is one of those rare cases in which less realism can actually benefit the game. The developers could implement an optional system that allows the most prestigious and financially florid team from the lower categories to enter F1, so that you can start from the bottom and make your way to the top. Number 4, the possibility to simulate a race and to skip one when both drivers are out. With the introduction of mechanical failures, the chances of having both drivers out of the race increases significantly. And if that happens, why do I still have to watch the race till the end if there's nothing left for me to do? Just give me the option to end that race and immediately have the result. The simulation of a race instead would speed things up, especially in some boring tracks, or for instance at the end of the season when everything is already decided, and you have no motivation to manage every lap of every race left, but you just want to start the next season. Currently, completing an entire season in the game takes quite a bit of time, and this, along with the fact that the game becomes a bit too repetitive after a while, makes it very hard to do a long-term career or some particular challenges. In Football Manager, for example, you can set things up at the beginning of your career and then simulate an entire season. Similarly, I want the possibility to set the strategy before the race and then simulate the result without having to manage it, maybe leaving the responsibility to manage the race to someone of the staff. I will come back on this point later in the video. Some may say that this takes away the fun, but actually allows to create interesting saves and challenges in a short time. And this comes particularly handy for content creators that want to share their creative ideas with their community. Next on the list is pay drivers. It's well known that many drivers on the F1 grid, instead of being paid by the owner of their car, drive for free, and bring with them either personal sponsorship or personal or family funding to finance the team's operations. So why not having pay drivers in-game, especially now that we can create our own team? For teams at the back of the grid and struggling financially, a pay driver represents a significant source of income in the team's budget. The possibility to hire a pay driver is an important strategical element that could allow a lot more variety in the team's lineups that would then result in more money to invest in the car development. Keeping with the drivers, number 6 is Youth Academy and a better young drivers development. Every F1 team now has a Youth Academy, and it's something we should have in-game as well. Young drivers development is one of the weak points of the 2023 game. Choosing a young driver is never profitable since their development is too slow and it takes too many seasons for them to reach a top level. Everyone dreams to find the next big star of the Formula 1 world, but with the current development rate is basically impossible. I want a management system for young drivers in which I can sign them to be part of my academy, manage their contracts to make them race in F2, and intensively invest in their development. In addition, for top teams would be important also to have the possibility to make their academy drivers race for another F1 team with whom they have some partnerships, like Ferrari and Haas, Mercedes and Williams and Red Bull and Racing Bulls. In this way, we could give a young driver the chance to make his bones in F1 with a team on the back of the grid before joining us in a top team. Another feature still related to drivers that I want is a deeper driver's characterization. Every F1 driver wants just one thing: become the world champion. So, despite being part of a team, drivers are competitive and selfish, and even their teammate is just a rival to beat. Drivers must have their own goals, demands, and expectations. I want to see their personality and ambitions come into play. I want to see how they react to our decisions during and after a race, and I want to see dynamics and rivalries between drivers that we will have to manage. Hopefully, this is what we'll get in F1 Manager 24, with what they called the new mentality system. Moving on, it's time to talk about staff. An F1 team consists of hundreds of people, and that's without considering all those in the factory. This does not mean that we need every one of them to be present in the game, but having just 3 roles besides the 2 race engineers feels a bit too simplified for me. There are a lot of roles that could be interesting to have, but I would like to talk about 2 roles that could be easily linked to 2 suggestions I made previously in this video. One, I'm not entirely sure it really exists, maybe not, or it may have a different name, while the other is actually one of the most important ones. The first one is the head of Youth Academy. Its name is self-explanatory. He would be in charge of the Youth Academy of the team, giving you reports and suggestions on how to manage your young drivers, like how they performed recently, how well they are developing, if they are ready for an F1 team, or if there are others promising talents to keep an eye on. The second one is the strategy engineer. I'm sure many of you have already heard the names of Hannah Schmitz, the genius behind Red Bull's winning strategies, and Inaki Rueda, which has become famous for some not-so-great strategies at Ferrari. For how the game currently works, this role is not present since we, as team principal, are also entirely responsible for the strategy. So why I want this role and how would it function? Well, as for the technical roles where higher attributes translate in a more effective car development, the higher the attributes of the strategy engineer, the better and more accurate the data provided to you for choosing the best strategy, not only before the race but also during the race, for examples in case of a safety car, wet conditions, or a red flag. In addition, he would be responsible for managing the race when simulating. You choose the best strategy before the race, then simulate and get immediately the result. If something happens during that race and the strategy needs to change, the decisions will be taken by him. In summary, he will act as an assistant coach when simulating a race. I know I'm making many comparisons with Football Manager, but as a fan of that game, and considering how many years of development it had and how popular it is, I think it's a great benchmark for a management game. Sticking with staff, another thing I want in F1 Manager inspired again by Football Manager is responsibility delegation. This one may be a bit controversial, I'm not entirely convinced myself, but I would like to include it anyway. I've seen reviews and comments of people that do not have a thorough knowledge of all aspects involved in the management of an F1 team, saying that the game is too complex for them, and for any casual player that maybe just wants to build the team and then sit back and watch them racing. This issue could be easily solved by delegating some responsibilities to your staff, like the race strategy as I said before, or the setup of the car during practice sessions, or even the development of the car during the season. For me, this would take away some important and challenging aspects of the game, but I understand that maybe there are a lot of players that are not necessarily interested in these aspects, and delegating some duties may help to make the game appealing to a wider audience. Giving the player a choice is never a bad thing, and this would allow everyone to choose how many things they want to manage while delegating others. Finally, last but definitely not least, my favorite feature, and also the less likely to have, full customization. What do I mean with this? Well, I mentioned previously how the game can become monotonous and repetitive, especially after a few seasons. The best way to improve the experience for me would be the possibility to fully customize the future seasons. Choosing the number of races, which tracks to include, where to have sprint weekends, changing the team's names, their drivers lineup, maybe even the liveries, adjusting teams and drivers' ratings. In other words, I want an official in-game editor that allows to do what is currently possible to achieve only partially with mods. This feature would make this game a dream come true for me, and I'm sure for many others as well, giving vent to players' creativity and imagination. And there you have it, F1 fans! Those were my top 10 features I'm hoping to see in F1 Manager. What do you think? What is that one feature you absolutely want? Do you have something else in mind? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and want to stay up to date with all things F1 Manager 24, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep dreaming of podium finishes and unforgettable victories on the virtual track.